afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Lufglass, and I want to welcome you to this RNN Masters of Sustainability webinar. RNN, the leading sustainability media and business platform, is excited to present this brand new monthly webinar series. On the third Wednesday of every month, RNN will present invigorating and thought-provoking educational opportunities to learn from leaders in sustainability from business, government, academia, and philanthropy, who are not only making an impact on the environment, but also leveraging sustainability for profitability. We hope you enjoy this month's webinar featuring Michael M. Richardson, the engineering visionary, founder, and president of eDrive Retro, the pioneer of an entirely new automotive category, the collectible EV. eDrive Retro transforms iconic vintage cars of yesteryear into high-performance electric vehicles of tomorrow, while also enhancing their long-term value and drivability. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Mr. Michael M. Richardson.
Andrew. Appreciate that great introduction. I hope everyone enjoyed the video presentation. We feel that that does a beautiful job of capturing the essence of what we're doing with eDrive Retro in transforming these beautiful classics into collectible electric vehicles for future generations to enjoy. So looking forward to sharing some information with everyone today about the background of the present electric vehicle industry globally, how eDrive Retro fits into that industry, and why we think we have a really compelling value proposition for customers and investors alike. So let's start by talking about the real evolution of sustainability in the auto market. Everyone has their perspective, but I'll just briefly share some thoughts from ours. Specifically, if we rewind over the past 20 years or so, we can see a fascinating evolution from the early days of modern electric vehicles with interesting examples such as the General Motors EV1 some number of years ago. Some of us may recall what that interesting, very aerodynamic car looked like, and some impact that began to have before GM shelved the project. But that led to the next round of vehicles, which I think was highlighted by the now ubiquitous Toyota Prius, the first really successful hybrid electric vehicle in the North American market, and finally the Tesla Roadster, the Lotus-based Roadster that really broke the paradigm. Up until that point, there was a sense, and the prior vehicles mentioned really tended to support that sense, that electric vehicles would be inevitably categorized as sort of glorified golf carts, that they were something for the dark green in the community and not necessarily for the mainstream, and certainly not something that would enthuse or excite automotive enthusiasts and driving enthusiasts. And I think the Tesla Roadster did a good job of starting to chip away at that image in these past years. But the really significant stage of evolution, I think, has begun more in the last 5 years, where we've been witness now to the birth of the mass market for plug-in battery electric vehicles. This is a remarkable period in automotive history because here we are after more than 100 years of optimization in internal combustion engines, fossil fuel engines, and the global automotive infrastructure built around those cars and around that technology, and many, many years of optimizing that technology. And now, right in the middle, comes this new concept of consumer-level cars and business-level cars, service vehicles, that sort of thing, that would leverage this technology in everyday use for a broad range of applications. And there's certainly been naysayers, and there's been some fits and starts along this evolutionary path. But I think it's safe to say now, just in the last couple of years, plug-in electrics have become really the hottest new growth segment for the OEMs, the large auto companies all around the world, all the way up to and including the high-end luxury vehicles that we see now. We think that that represents a step ahead, and I think a perfect example of that just came out at the Geneva Auto Show, specifically the first Bentley Roadster that's a plug-in electric. Who would have thought 10 years ago, when this market really didn't even exist, that Bentley would be showcasing such a beautiful vehicle, and that the point of the vehicle would be this high-performance electric drive system. So we see that the evolution and the sustainability movement in automotive in the form of electric vehicles is now really here to stay, and it's really being expressed at all levels of the industry and in all geographies. For example, China is pretty widely recognized to be the largest installed base of electric vehicles in the world at this stage, with over 650,000 vehicles on the roads and many thousands being added per month throughout China, really representing an incredible turnabout in that country, plagued with pollution and other environmental issues, and very much embracing electric vehicles, not simply from a green conscience, but understanding that they do represent the profitable segment of the automotive future as well, and a shift from traditional manufacturing models and traditional sources of supply. So that's a market to watch for its technology and its global reach. Beyond China and the Asian markets, we see tremendous thought leadership happening in places like Norway, France, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands. These countries are leading the way. Norway, for example, has the highest per capita personal ownership of electric vehicles and of Tesla motor vehicles in particular. France, very well known for having instituted in the last few years increasingly stringent pollution control requirements on the automotive industry, and specifically in larger cities. The mayor of Paris, for example, has been often quoted as expressing her desire to eliminate fossil fuel vehicles from the city of Paris in her lifetime. And so we see very lofty goals and very dedicated communities of consumers starting to develop in these countries. Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, others, all representing strong interest in legislation and mandates for a zero emissions future. I think it's interesting to note here in the U.S., we've had some fits and starts of our own, and some thought leadership in specific places, in California, for example, in New York, and a couple of other locations where there's been lobbying and legislation around sustainability and around reducing urban area air pollution. But we see some backward steps in the current administration, perhaps around the EPA and around subsidies. We see subsidies have worked quite well in Scandinavia and some of the other countries. So we have high hopes that ultimately the logic of the open economy will win the day, and EVs will continue to be an important part of the American automotive future as well. Perhaps a bit of a setback in these first couple of years, but no doubt the U.S. will catch up again, because again, these represent both a sustainability opportunity as well as a tremendous economic opportunity. We'll talk about that a little bit further. The factors that really drive those megatrends include consumer sentiment. We understand that consumer sentiment varies greatly around the world, but the sense of importance for sustainability for future generations and for protection of the environment is undeniable and irreversible. There may be thought leadership in Scandinavia and Western Europe, especially the big cities, in that regard, but we feel that consumers have become aware now that not only can these cars actually have a positive impact on the environment, but they can also be enjoyable to drive and, as eDrive Retro would like to show, can actually represent a fantastic value proposition even from an investment perspective over time. Public policy also has a big effect. We see, for example, public policies being enacted across Europe and Scandinavia that have made the expansion of publicly available EV charging infrastructure a governmental priority. eDrive Retro, for example, was founded initially in Estonia, the first country in the world to have established a national charging network, and this is back over 5 years ago now, where there's no public road in the country that's more than 50 kilometers away from a public rapid charging station. And other countries across Europe are beginning to catch up. The Open Charging Alliance, for example, represents an industry consortium, not a government mandate, but rather a commercial opportunity in the works for otherwise competing or potentially competing networks of privately owned public charging infrastructure to create a consortium, an alliance that allows consumers to take their electric vehicle all the way across Europe seamlessly, and therefore helps the network, all of the participants in the network, to aggregate demand onto that public charging network. So I think that kind of initiative by and for commerce, I think, is an important one because it demonstrates that the sustainability model really has strong legs and is here to stay, that companies are starting to figure out how to deliver greater value to their clients all across Europe, all across Scandinavia, and in some cases now starting to look at crossing the United States and North America and Canada. So we see, for example, significant power companies and others with substantial infrastructure investment that are starting to join up in this proliferation of charging stations. And that's a necessity to help continue to breathe life into this sustainability evolution in the automotive market. So now we come to eDrive Retro, and what are we doing to capitalize on these mega trends? Well, first of all, to get back to basic principles, our concept here is to transform beautiful, iconic vintage cars into reliable cars that can be driven every day and that maintain their authenticity. That's what makes our cars collectible EVs. So we're not trying to displace the family minivan or the city bus. What we're doing is creating a new investment and ownership valuation opportunity for discriminating customers that enjoy the concept of driving, enjoy the driving experience, and also want to contribute to the sustainability movement. We break that down into a couple of thoughts here. First, we see it as wearing your car. We think that the car, the automotive choices that people make, are an extension of their self-expression. The act of driving is an extension of your sense of freedom and individuality. And certainly, as we think about the very term sports car or vintage sports car, no doubt as you hear that term, something familiar, a familiar image pops into your mind, maybe from a movie or maybe from a friend's car or from a car in your family's past or from a TV show or a fashion advertising, something like that. These kinds of cars evoke an emotional response at a visceral level, whether you're 3 or 93. There's an association with romance and freedom and style that is undeniable with these classic designs. And we feel that that's an important thing for us to capitalize on, recognizing that more and more modern cars are essentially all designed by the wind tunnel and become convergent. If you look across the streets of New York City or Los Angeles, for example, at the masses of cars out there, they begin to look more and more the same, regardless of mark or purpose. Whereas when you look across a row of vintage classic cars, you see each individual for its beautiful style and uniqueness. And we want to capitalize on that to bring that level of individuality in the automotive expression to our customers. But it doesn't stop there. We don't want to create museum pieces. We want people to be able to drive that car every day if they want to, and to be able to be confident in that car. So part of our concept is to remove the unreliable bits and insert contemporary electronic drives and the software controls and the modular components that make that possible, so that you can actually drive this beautiful classic. So let's talk about how does that make eDrive Retro unique? Well, we believe that we're the first to market with this approach to a truly collectible EV, and we feel that we've developed some interesting intellectual property. We've got a pipeline of what we believe are patentable concepts around that IP, and we'll continue to expose that through our products and services in the years to come. Our management team and engineering team represent
I believe we have lost Michael temporarily. So while we get him back, just wanted to hope that you're all having an enjoyable experience in this RNN webinar. Apologize for the technical difficulties. At this time, I do want to let you know that at the end of the presentation, Michael will be taking questions.
Hi, I'm back.
So if you, there you are, Michael. I was just letting them know that you will be taking questions at the end. So if you did want to submit a question, folks, you can type one out in the bottom left corner of your screen. You'll see a Q&A, and you can send any questions to Michael that you would like. So without further ado, Michael, again, if you wanted to continue.
Yes, thanks very much, Andrew. Sorry for that. We're not in the telecom business, we're in the auto industry, so we have to suffer the slings and arrows of cell phones. In any event, we think that the combination of vision and capability and our drive for uncompromising engineering quality really set us apart in the market space at this point. And we'd like to share further thoughts about how we're expressing that through our product line throughout the rest of this presentation. So who are we targeting? Well, specifically, the customers that we're looking for at this stage, in the early stage of becoming established as a brand, are people that are interested individualists, not necessarily car people, quote unquote, but people that have a desire to enjoy that sense of ownership, that feeling of getting behind the wheel and driving these beautiful vintage cars in the confidence that they're not going to break down by the roadside, they're not going to overheat. When they need to start, they'll start. And as a result, this is a disruptive kind of approach because we understand that there are also sort of the museum purists or the so-called hot rodders or petrol heads that are more interested in horsepower and speed records than practicality and drivability, or in style and function. We believe that there's a much larger audience of people who enjoy the look and feel of these beautiful cars and would enjoy ownership given the opportunity to have that car in an electric format so that it's sustainable, it's a car with a conscience, it's a car with intelligence that's connected, and they can enjoy that car on the roads safely, reliably, and with high performance. From a geographic perspective, we're starting in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, and branching into Western Europe being based as we are as an engineering group in Helsinki, Finland, and having the lead in Northern Europe and in Western Europe for these kinds of vehicles. We think it's an ideal place. But obviously, the U.S. and North American market is of huge interest, and we think our cars will have a tremendous appeal here, bringing these cars in from places like Miami, New York, L.A., the sort of lifestyle and fashion capitals of the country. And then, of course, the Australasian Chinese markets, China, for example, well known to understand and appreciate icons of Western lifestyle. And we think these cars represent that in a very unique way. So the markets are vast, and the opportunities are out there, I think, in a great way to disrupt the traditional model that says, oh, you have to have a mechanic in order to own one of these cars. No, that's no longer true. And you can also drive it in good conscience because it's truly sustainable. So who are we working with? Well, we're building a global supply chain of strategic partnerships. These partnerships are with technology suppliers and also craftsmen. So this page represents a cross-section. For example, companies like Invenux and Visedo in the EV battery and EV control electronics spaces with unique, novel, patented concepts and advances in batteries and drive electronics. Yasa Motors, a brilliant company based in Oxford, England, that's produced the most amazing compact electric drive motors that you can imagine, and you'll see some imagery from that in a bit. Metropolitan University of Applied Science in Helsinki has been a good recruiting source for us to bring in engineers that actually have experience in design in the EV space, which is a newly evolving, rapidly evolving space for engineers. And Northern Europe, where we're doing this engineering, is a hotbed of that kind of skill. And then we have Grips Garage, our proud partners in Helsinki, who are very skilled craftsmen in the traditional arts of classic car restoration. So rather than go out and try and repeat that model, we're taking a best-of-breed integration kind of an approach. Torque Trends building very robust EV gear trains and transmissions and working with us in other market sectors. All of these represent global best of the best from around the world, and that's part of our strategic plan. Moving forward, we can talk about our business model. So let's split this business model up into two categories here. Collectible EVs really fall into two types. What we call bespoke or custom transformations, where we can accept a customer's car or we can source the car of their dreams in the open market to help them transform a truly one-of-a-kind collectible EV that they can enjoy for years to come. And then what we call our limited series collectible EV. This is where we'll do a series of transformations of similar cars, again, all authentic, actual, original cars, but we can then standardize the engineering components on those and be able to give very quick turnaround for those customers so that we can build and deliver in a quick turn at a high level of quality and still put people behind the wheel of a beautiful, iconic, classic car. On the other side of the ledger, we have fleet service EVs, which may seem to be very different worlds from the collectible classics, but the reality is that our EV architecture, the design engineering that goes into the electric vehicle drivetrains and control systems, is actually quite applicable to service vehicles as well. I'm referring to things like light pickup trucks and vans and those sorts of things that are used by fleet operators all around the world. And we feel that participating in the global supply chain for those kinds of conversions for fleet operators will benefit our customers on the collectible EV side and continue to give us an outlet for our EV engineering services. So let's break it down a little bit and look at some examples of what we're considering bespoke versus limited series versus fleet. So what we're looking at here is a montage of images from our 1972 Triumph GT6 EV. As you can see from the photos, inside, outside, and beneath the skin in our CAD model, we take a very complete engineering approach. We have a 5-step process, and we transform these cars from potential barn finds in tough shape to the kind of beautiful show-ready condition that you see in these photographs, including meticulous restoration, a beautiful custom interior design, as you can see in the upper left, and our signature industrial design of our EV drivetrain, as you can see on the right. So when you flip the hood on these cars, we want you to be able to experience that unique disruptive combination of ultra-contemporary electric drive with all of the features that you come to expect from manufacturers like Tesla, things like regenerative braking, adaptive software, and high-speed charging options at the public infrastructure, all of those sorts of things, but packaged in a way that is truly respectful of the original design intent of the car. So this car that we're looking at, for example, was a British-built car from an Italian designer, something that we think is iconically beautiful and unique. We've given it an interior that complements that style and the design intent of the original car, and we've given it a drivetrain that gives it the performance and the responsiveness that you would come to expect from a modern car. So we feel that this represents a beautiful example of a bespoke design, as you can see from the small CAD model vignette there in the bottom. Part of what we do is we start with an engineering model of the car and go through our transformative process to adapt our EV architecture to that particular platform. And this summary is in the material here to give you a sense for what some of those steps are. But let's move forward and talk about our limited series cars in comparison. So what we're looking at here is our first limited series edition. This will become a series of vehicles from global manufacturers, not just British cars, not just cars from the 70s. So for example, you see this is a 1959 MGA EV Roadster. You see that beautiful example in red below. That's what these cars look like when complete. And you can see me leaning on what we call our rolling chassis right above there. That's actually the chassis from this 1959 MGA EV, which we have transformed, restored, and updated to be able to drive this beautiful vehicle with this motor that you see in the CAD image and our fully integrated modular battery system that you see in the image on the lower right, so that you've got the best of all worlds. You've got a completely beautiful, authentic, well-restored, and custom interior finished MGA Roadster, and you've got the confidence of a highly engineered drivetrain and suspension to match, so that you can enjoy this vehicle for years to come with extremely minimal maintenance. We're using direct drive here. We're minimizing the number of parts and components and service assembly so that this car can be enjoyed for years to come with very minimal maintenance and is completely modular. So what we can do is talk about a couple of the advantages here. Let's get to our next slide. There we go. We think this is a really disruptive concept because effectively we're introducing build to order into the classic world, where it's not a kit, not a replica, but you can order this car and receive it on the order of 90 days later. That's because we can stage these cars in advance. We can share modular components across vehicles. And so in these limited runs of 5 to 25 vehicles, we can actually offer this kind of service and even a warranty, so that you've got an authentic 1959 Roadster that's got brand new running gear and a warranty. We think that's unique, and we'll be offering beyond this MGA others as we work with the market to see what are the other kinds of platforms our customers are interested in experiencing through this limited series build-to-order classic opportunity. And finally, let's talk about the third leg in the stool here, partnerships in fleet vehicles. So this is an example of a familiar Ford F-150 pickup conversion. This conversion is designed through one of our partnerships, and our participation would be in the supply chain. So we can help this partner who happens to be building vehicles in the U.S. We can build these for them in Europe and Scandinavia and create a localized product out of a strategic partnership. And we feel that fleet vehicle operations can enjoy the same sustainability advantages and at the same time tremendous reductions in their cost base. If you look at the extension of useful life of the vehicle, for example, and the tremendous reduction in the maintenance cost in the case of this F-150, reducing the maintenance cost on the order of 60% while extending the life of the vehicle 3 to 5 years. You multiply those savings times hundreds of vehicles in a fleet, and it's a remarkable ROI. So we believe that that's an important component in really the sustainability model for commercial vehicles, which should be following the sustainability advances for consumer-owned vehicles. This obviously gives us an opportunity as a business to join forces through strategic partnerships, and ultimately gives us all in the EV community a way to further preserve and save the planet by many thousands of these vehicles being converted, rather than continuing to operate with their diesel or gasoline engines until the end of their service life in 5 or 7 years, to be replaced by an electric vehicle at that point in time. So we believe that piece of the model is also an important economic contributor and helps reduce the costs, helps speed the development for our collectible EVs as well. So just to summarize here a little bit, let's talk about the value proposition, because I want to leave plenty of time for questions. We've got a whole series of questions queuing up, I can see already. First of all, these cars are both collectible and drivable. So again, part of the disruptive concept here is that the rolling art that you see with these beautiful interiors, beautiful restoration, are not intended to be stowed away in a garage somewhere or hidden away in a museum somewhere. These are beautiful, authentic vehicles to be driven and to be enjoyed. And in fact, driving them doesn't diminish or deplete their value in the same way that driving a restored internal combustion engine mechanical drivetrain car does. Because in that case, the wear and tear on those cars and the cost of maintaining those cars on the road can be quite prohibitive, whereas in our case, we feel we're building value because now we're extending the life of these beautiful vintage cars for decades to come, and doing it in a sustainable and smart way. So it's not only clean and eco-friendly, but it's also modular, so that this system can be retrofit with improvements later on. If I pay a premium to restore, for example, that beautiful 1959 MGA Roadster to its original condition with its original 4-cylinder or dual carburetor engine, then once I've done that restoration, the time clock starts every time I drive I've chipped away a little bit at my value, and I've chipped away a little bit at the longevity of that delicate internal combustion engine drivetrain. Whereas with our limited series EV version of the car, I'm driving on a completely modern, completely maintenance-aware system that reduces the amount of intervention required and that is replaceable and upgradable. So over time, 3 years out, 5 years out, I may decide, oh, eDrive Retro now offers a new battery technology for this car that doubles my range, or a new motor and drive combination that gives me even more power and responsiveness. I can bring this car in and have those components swapped out quite readily and the software updated. And now I have extended the driving cycle of that car tremendously. So we think that the combination of innovation and the disruption of the build to order is supported by a future-proof aspect to these cars that is very, very compelling, really giving them an ROI for the fleet as well as an ROI for the private consumer that gives both a tremendous value proposition that heretofore has not been available previously. And so we look forward to working with our strategic partners and the market itself in identifying future cars for our limited series. We look forward to working with a series of individuals and their bespoke engagements to help them realize their sustainable automotive visions through those custom bespoke transformations that we referred to, and working with the fleet operators and others to apply this same kind of underlying EV architecture and EV technology to an industrial scale of problem solving and sustainability and cost savings that helps the economy and the environment at the same time. So with that, I think maybe what we should do is transition over to some Q&A so that we have a little bit of time to do our questions and answers. How's that sound, Andrew?
Sounds good to me, Michael. Thank you. That was a great presentation, and we do have quite a few questions to get to. So let's start with this one. All right, we got a long one, Michael, to kick it off. How do you determine when it's a smart move to turn your classic into an electric? You wouldn't necessarily put an electric motor into a Miura and expect the value to increase. So what kind of cars make sense both in functionality while not losing the value? Got all that?
I think so. And I think maybe that's like a Lamborghini Miura.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not the expert.
No, that's all right. And I think that's a really wise question because as with anything else in the automotive space, it's a matter of what problem are we solving and what's appropriate for the context. So, at the heart of it, we love cars. We love the history of automotive advances and endeavors and expression, and would never suggest that a truly novel museum piece of a car or an historically important specific example of a car be somehow transformed into something else. So if you're talking about an original Lamborghini Miura S or a Ferrari 250 GTO from Le Mans or something like that, remarkable historic specific vehicles, we don't foresee that those are the cars that are going to get transformed. We also don't foresee that those are the cars that are going to get driven very often. Those are in that sort of collection museum piece category. So instead, what we're looking for is cars that people really want to drive, cars that people can enjoy and that are iconic in their style and timeless in their design, but not necessarily priceless in their historical significance. So there's many examples of beautiful classics that could benefit from being transformed. And I think it's a matter for the collector, for example, if they have multiple cars in their collection, to consider cars that have yet to be fully restored. So for example, if you've got that E-Type that's missing an engine or missing a transmission, or that barn find Alpha Spider or something like that, those cars are ideal for a transformation. But taking a car that you've already invested in restoring and restoring it in this fashion really doesn't seem to be the appropriate way to go. So I hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next one, which is, what are the expected miles per kilowatt hour in one of your collectible cars?
That's a tough question because these cars vary so much in a couple of dimensions. One, in the specific geometries of the car. So they may be a very lightweight car like this MGA or like the Triumph GT6, or they may be a heavier sports car. We may be replacing a V8 engine in a 1960s Coupe de Ville. So it's specific to the vehicle, but the good news there is that we're looking at very efficient drivetrains. We're looking at dedicated drivetrains, not hybrids where we're dragging around a whole separate drivetrain or power generation. And the cars tend to be very light. So we tend to have very efficient designs. The 59 MGA Roadster, for example, and we'll share the spec sheets with everybody at the end of the presentation, is equipped with on the order of 21 kilowatt hours of onboard capacity. And we believe that that will provide somewhere in the range of 100 to 150 kilometers between charges. And we've also equipped those cars with both convenience charging. So in Europe, for example, you can plug it into any 230-volt outlet and charge the car in about 6 hours, or plug it into any of the high voltage rapid charging public charging stations and top it up in about 25 minutes. So it's a combination of the way it's used and the way it's driven. Obviously, as with a fossil fuel car, if you've got a bit of a lead foot and you're out there to enjoy your Roadster for acceleration and cornering and that kind of thing, you're going to diminish your energy per distance. But the onboard telemetry will help you keep track of that, and you can do things like train yourself on how to optimize your driving experience and your range if that's part of your goal. Frankly, we feel that a lot of our owners will be so enthralled with the off-the-line torque and the instant torque through the curves that they'll tend to just enjoy that energy consumption with zero emissions on the open roads and benefit from the rapid charging ability so that they can stop for a coffee, charge up, and continue their trip.
All right, thank you, Michael. I think we've got time for, what do you think, 2 more?
Yeah, definitely. Let's go.
All right.
I'll try and
Let's
shorten
do
it
2
up
more.
a little bit so we can get some more.
Okay. This one is, if the hydrogen cell tech becomes more prevalent, will it affect the EV concept as it is built right now?
Good question. And I think that the beauty of our approach at eDrive Retro is we're taking what we call an architectural approach to the drivetrain and the componentry. So, for example, we're not building and creating battery chemistry. We're not building motor technology. We are effectively a system integrator taking the best of breed of what's available and combining that and controlling that and integrating that into our beautiful classics. So if, for example, the problem of packaging high-pressure hydrogen and the challenges of public infrastructure to refill those high-pressure cells becomes prevalent, even in a geography, then it's straightforward for us to adopt that. In effect, it's just another kind of battery technology in our EV architecture. So we don't see that as a threat. The bigger challenge is probably just its impact on the public infrastructure of energy distribution. And so should that win out at some point, perhaps in the distant future or perhaps in a specific geography, then we can work with strategic partners that supply the components and integrate those components into our existing architecture. So we believe that the free market is the ultimate litmus test, and that innovation will happen globally and endlessly. For us, the electric automotive industry right now is probably about where the internal combustion engine automotive industry was in the 1920s, when all kinds of people were building different types of engines in barns and garages all around the world, and people were innovating new ideas and adding things and trying things, and it was a very empirical period. The same thing is really true in the electric vehicle world, where now things like building gigafactories to reduce the cost of batteries or creating new materials to replace rare earth in magnet components and that kind of thing is all top of mind in the news. And we get to benefit because essentially in the EV world, all ships rise on that tide. So if it becomes the ultimate hydrogen economy, we're happy with that. We'll follow that trend. Right now, we've got a supply chain that's really focal on the traditional lithium-ion compositions, and we can bring those to market right now. So we think it's the best of all worlds.
All right, I think we got time for one more. Maybe we can squeeze in a second. We'll see. Typically, what condition does a car have to be in for this process to be effective? Let's say a car has been sitting in someone's garage for 20 years. Could you get it up and running?
Well, that's part of the real beauty of our business model. If you think about it, in the traditional case of a pure restoration, there's a lot of focus on the engine and the drivetrain and the condition of those components and the cost of finding replacement parts for that engine and transmission and tuning it up and doing all that stuff. So for traditional restoration, that's a problem. In our case, we delete those components entirely. We're not attempting to restore those components. So it doesn't matter whether they're there in decent condition, they're in terrible condition, or missing entirely. For us, the barn find with no engine at all is just as good a starting point. And if you look at some of the starting points for some of the vehicles we're working on now, the MGAs and others, we can take a car that you'd be surprised at how far gone you might think it is, and bring that back, breathe new life into it, because we do such an extensive restoration, and we replace the interior with a custom design of our own. So it's not so much about the condition of the vehicle, it's about the relative rarity and the availability of some of the component parts. So the more of those cars that were originally built, the easier it is to bring it back on the road, even if it's been sitting in an open field for 20 years. And we're not afraid of that. Bring them on. We can do it.
All right. What do you think, Michael? One more?
Yeah, let's go for it. If the audience isn't too tired, we can do one more.
All right. Let's see. Technical question. Is it viable to attach the motor to an existing automatic or manual transmission for a better handling characteristic in a town situation?
That, again, is a really good question for a conversation with the potential owner to decide what's the goal. How do you want the driving experience to work for you, and how do you want to interact with the vehicle? So for the vehicles that we build speculatively, like the limited series cars, we're eliminating those components and keeping it very simple. In a bespoke situation, we can work with the owner to craft what is that driving experience going to work like, and how integrated does that system want to be. So there are really fundamental differences between the electric motor and the internal combustion engine in the way that they deliver power and torque in particular to the drive shaft. And so just a direct bolt up is not necessarily optimal. There may be a combination there where changing year reduction or changing ratios is appropriate, because the electric motor delivers so much more torque from so much lower in the RPM range. But we think there's room for improvisation there on the bespoke engagements that we entertain, and would be open to that conversation.
All right, Michael, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for your participation in today's RNN Masters of Sustainability webinar. Hope you all enjoyed it. On behalf of RNN and eDrive Retro, we hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we hope you join us next time. Our next webinar will be on Wednesday, April 19th, featuring Michael Green of the Climate Action Business Association, leading a discussion about organizing local business leaders to be more effective advocates for climate change action. For more information, you can visit renewablenow.biz. And before you get going, I do want to direct your attention to what Michael was mentioning before about the eDrive Retro spec sheet. I'm going to pull it up right here for you so you can see what we're talking about. Should be on your screen momentarily. This is a bit of a breakdown about eDrive Retro, the MGA EV Roadster. You can thumb through this if you'd like, and you can download your own copy. If you go to the top of your screen and you open the media library, it's that little piece of paper with a play button, the little triangle arrow at the top, and then at the bottom you will see shared files, and under shared files we'll say eDrive Retro MGA EV Roadster spec sheet, and you go over to it, hover over the green arrow and click download file. Click the green arrow to download that file. So thanks everybody. Thanks again, Michael, and we hope you join us next time.
Thank you, Andrew.